Thank you. Those of you who thought that today's Technoport Talks are only about Nordic and European power balance are only partly right. You see, I will take this opportunity to introduce you to some ancient history and even some poetry, so consider yourself warned by now. Now, one of more lines across the Skagerrak or the North Sea normally mean only one thing when presented by Statkraft: more high-voltage interconnectors, or cables, if you will. However, this particular line illustrates a rowing trip made some 200 years ago. You see, there was this guy called Terje Viken who rowed all the way to Denmark. And the reason for this athletic feat was this. You see, the combined kingdoms of Norway and Denmark were allied with Napoleon against, among others, the Brits and the Swedes. As a result of this, the English made a naval embargo on Norway, effectively stopping all trade between Norway and Denmark and the continent. Norway could not export, and even worse, Norway could not import. This resulted in famine. And Terje Viken, he was a sailor who lived just outside the town of Grimstad on the southern coast. And he marries and he gets a daughter. When the naval embargo is effective, he is forced to row across to Denmark in order to feed his family with 3 barrels of barley. Now, on his way home from Denmark, Terje is stopped by an English corvette, and the captain sinks both his boat and his cargo. Even worse, they keep him imprisoned in London for more than 5 years until the war is over. And when he finally comes home, he finds his wife and his daughter dead. Consequently, his life is in many respects ruined, and not least because he holds so many grudges against those who stopped him from saving his own family. Now, the climax of the poem of Terje Viken finds place many, many years later, when the English captain who imprisoned Terje is lost at sea just outside the town of Grimstad. And the sailor Terje, he goes out to save them, but then he recognizes the captain and realizes that he can revenge his own loss from many years back. But in spite of this, he conquers his will for revenge and spares the English family and reconciles with them. And in doing this, Terje got back to his own self and his own life, and thus saves himself. Now, the story of Terje Viken has many layers and many messages. My assertion is that some of them are even relevant for today's subject, which is the Nordic power balance. Now, historically, the poem powerfully illustrates that isolation, either it is enforced upon us or chosen, is a very unattractive option. Norway has always relied on imports, and it is Norway's openness and willingness to export that has made this country rich. On a more metaphorical level, the story demonstrates that everyone in some way are in the same boat. There is a shared destiny between Terje's family and himself. They can't do without him, and his life is ruined without them. Likewise, there is a shared destiny between the English captain and his family and Terje. By saving them, he saves his own humanity. But the poem of Terje Viken is also a story about the necessity of conquering your own instincts, do the right thing, and finding common ground with your enemies. For these reasons, I think that the poem of Terje Viken is an appropriate vantage point for my more prosaic address on the Nordic power balance. I will start by showing why I think isolation is harmful. Now, we are now in the early stages of a formidable growth of renewable energy in Europe. But Europe still has a long way to go before they have reached the target of 20% renewable energy in 2020. Approximately 600 terawatt hours new renewable energy must be brought to the market within 9 years. That is around 5 times the current power production of Norway. And even then, they have barely started on the journey toward the 80% renewable society they are aiming for in 2050. Now, as you can tell from the map, the brunt of the new renewable energy will come from wind and photovoltaic power, which of course are intermittent energy sources that need huge amounts of balancing power in order to meet demand throughout the day, throughout the week, and throughout the year. Now, on the other hand, in the Nordics, there is probably building a significant power surplus in the coming 10 to 15 years. This has many causes, but some of them are to be found in the following. The Finns are building a new power plant, and several upgradings on the Swedish power plants are underway. Following the EU Renewables Directive, all the Nordic countries, including Norway, have very ambitious renewables goals for 2020. The Swedish-Norwegian electricity certificate market will come into effect in 2012, concurrently introducing more than 26 terawatt hours in the two countries combined. And adding to that, increased energy efficiency is expected to result in lower demand. So it is imperative that we get a meaningful use for this power surplus in a way that does not include deflated prices, overconsumption, and waste. Whoops. Now, the massive introduction of new intermittent energy sources creates a huge demand for flexibility. Subsea interconnections provide this flexibility, and they make it possible to transport energy where it is needed, when it is needed. And this flexibility is both climate-friendly and makes possible a green value creation for Norway, the Nordics, and for Europe. This makes for a win-win situation. Now, the power exchange between the continent and the delivery of balancing power takes advantage of top load pricing in the European market. And it contributes to the security of supply in Norway and the Nordics. You see, we have always had high variability in the weather in Norway. And these variations will probably increase as a result of global warming. In the Nordics, we have just had 2 very cold winters, and I might add, very dry winters, that has really tested our power supply. During these 2 winters, the interconnectors have saved the day. Now, without these interconnectors, we would have to develop many more hydro reservoirs in order to have enough power reserves, entailing unacceptable environmental impacts. However, in wet years, we have just experienced the wettest August in recorded history, and in wet years, more power can be exported in order to avoid flooding. In dry years, we can import more power in order to avoid dry reservoirs. Now, interconnectors have a stabilizing effect and is a major contribution to secure investments in renewable energy production, which in turn will limit the need for subsidies. Everybody will win. The power business itself, the power-intensive industry, and society as such. In our opinion, the exchange of power creates good conditions for value creation. Firstly, it delivers flexibility in the form of renewable hydropower, which creates value for the utilities. This also creates great value for society. Secondly, interconnectors contribute to a balanced development that is vital to security of supply and provides predictability for the industry and consumers. This, in turn, secures jobs throughout the country. Now, we in the power business is from time to time accused of single-mindedly pursuing export possibilities for power, and thus ignoring those who export energy in frozen form, the process industry. And I might add, for those of you who wonder what this picture is all about, this is aluminum. I can assure you that we in Statkraft are well aware of where we come from. This company's position has been attained because we, in tandem with the industry and the power-intensive industry, have created value for owners, local communities, and society as such for more than 100 years. There has been a shared destiny between the industry and Statkraft for more than 100 years, and I am sure that that will continue in the future. Now, this shared destiny forces us to secure impulses for growth for both sectors. We both depend on the value creation that finds place when Statkraft and the power-intensive industry meet. Now, we can see that an enhanced exchange of power between the Nordics and the continent raises some challenging issues. The most important of these challenges is the so-called carbon leakage. Now, carbon leakage arises when climate policies entail a movement of production and emissions to countries that do not have climate policies. And in this respect, this means outside Europe, or most countries outside Europe. Now, Norway's power-intensive industries are generally technology leaders and are based on an emission-free power supply. Thus, closures of Norwegian industries will, in high probability, entail increased global greenhouse emissions. Now, the EU are currently initiating measures that are to hinder carbon leakage and movement of the industries out of Europe. Now, we are very concerned that our most important customers must benefit from a publicly financed compensation scheme that counteract the CO2 fraction of our emission-free power supply. In tandem with the industry itself and our respective organizations, we are currently working with authorities on this issue. Now, before landing, I would like to step back 200 years and revisit Terje Viken's epic journey across to Denmark. Now, when Terje rode to Denmark, it was a steady, determined effort that brought him there, and almost back. His motives were strong, but they were split. He did it to save himself, but also for the family and community that he was a part of. I think the analogies to today's debate are quite obvious. A flexible, renewable Europe demands clear and predictable governance signals in order to be realized. This governance has to be determined and focused, steady balancing the development of new renewable energy with power exchange in order to give us both stimulus for growth. Thank you.